In this video, we're going to be going over the depth render output, or often referred to as a z-depth pass, inside of Modo. And what that is it's going to be an image that kind of shows the distance between your virtual camera and your geometry in the scene. And in our scene, we have the little toy car that comes standard in the content pack, and then we just have a plane. So let's jump to the render tab real quick. And really quickly, we just want to frame our camera, which right here looks pretty good. Again, we have this little antenna going up right here, so we just want to make sure that that's in the frame. And then clicking on our blue render globe, I am going to change our resolution to 1920 by 1080 to make it full HD. So now I'm going to add that depth output. Again, the z-depth or the depth output is just another render output. So again, we have our final color, our alpha, they're always there. So I'm just going to go to add layer, go down to render outputs, go to basic and choose depth. And again, as soon as you add this, nothing really changes over here yet. So let's go up here to this effect. It's currently set to final color, the default. I'm just going to change it to depth. And right now everything is all white. Ideally, we don't want that. This is just the default settings. So we want to make sure that our depth output, render output, is selected, so then we'll have access to the properties. So again, I'm on the properties tab here and then the render output right here. So what we're going to want to do is hit this little button right here called the remap pixel values. And as soon as we do this, you can kind of see two things happened. One, it changed over here a little bit, and two, this maximum depth changed. So this depth is how far away the camera is from the object in a sense. So what you can do is if you know the depth, you can just put it in, but if you don't, we can kind of see what's going on here. I can see the background. Ideally, I want the background to be completely black and the car to be multiple shades of gray. Again, white equals closer to the camera, black equals farther away from the camera. So let's just, to see what happens, let's cut this in half to 5. Again, that's going to effectively bring this maximum depth closer. So again, this background is going to get darker. Again, if we were to do the opposite, it was at 10. If we set it to 20, everything's going to be closer to white. We don't want that. Put it to 5 and it got closer. So let's just step down 1 meter at a time. So 4 gets a little bit darker. 3, a little bit darker. 2, there we go. So what's happening right here is the background is, I want that to be all black. And then if you just look at here, this is kind of just the gradient of how far away from the camera it is up close, closer to white. The farther you get back, it slowly fades to gray. So let's take this in to 1 meter and see what happens. Again, we went too far back. So let's try 1.5 meters. That's looking a little bit better. So ideally what we want is we want to have effectively a color change or a tone change between the different depths that we have, and we want to be able to see that fairly well. So right now our plane is cutting off right here. It might actually be even cutting off our back wheel. So let's try 1.6, not that we can even see the back wheel. But again, we do want a good change between these. So 1.5, 1.6, something in there would work just fine. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and render these out. And again, I have 3 different render outputs, the final color, the alpha, and the depth. And when I hit render, it's actually going to grab all 3 of these and render them all at the same time. So render, and this might take a little bit, so we'll speed up the video. There we go, all set. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save out the final color and that z-depth. So there's a little output right here. We have the final color, the alpha output, which again, we have that white plane back there, so it's really not cutting. There's no unrendered spaces in the scene. And then we have the depth output. So let's save both of these out. Image, I'm just going to save this, just save over this test one as FC for final color, PNG. This one as well, save as, set to a PNG. We'll call this ZD for Z-depth. There we go. Now let's jump over to Photoshop. So now that we're in Photoshop, I just want to point something out. We have our first one, the final color. If I go to image mode, oops, there we go. It says RGB color and it's set to 8-bit, so that's kind of your default render output. If this was a colored render, if it was textured or whatever, that would all show up. Looking at the z-depth pass, go to image mode, And this one is actually going to be set to grayscale with an 8-bit channel. So again, just be aware that that's there. So what I'm going to do is I have the move tool active. I'm going to left click and drag. I'm still holding left click, and then I'm going to hold shift. You can see that when I let go of click, the image just pops right on top of the other one. So if I zoom right in right here, I can see these two images are sitting directly on top of each other. The thing you want to avoid is dragging it in and moving it. I mean, there's a black border, so you'd probably notice, or you can just kind of make sure that your little pink arrows show that it snaps, but regardless, we just want the two images sitting directly on top of each other. And another little trick you can do, if you need to slightly adjust your z-depth pass, you can actually go to your levels and tweak those a little bit. You can see how it's kind of fading and getting farther away or seemingly getting closer to the camera. Just know that you can do that. So I'll just go ahead and hit cancel. So what we want to use the z-depth image for is actually we want to throw it into the alpha channels. So what I'm going to do is you can either hit the M key to marquee select and drag everything, or you can hit Control A or select all. Realistically, you just want to select all of the pixels. So from here, you want to do Edit Copy or Control C, whatever you're more comfortable with. Then we're going to go over to the Channels tab, make a new channel. It's going to be on our alpha layer, and we're going to hit Paste. So now I can just hit the RGB. So this is going to be saved in here as an extra channel. I can go to Layers, go to Select, Deselect, or Control D, either or. And then I can just turn off this layer. So we have the final color that we're looking at. So the next thing we want to do is just select our layer 1 or our final color output, go up to Filter, choose Blur, and then choose Lens Blur. So from here, the source is most likely going to be set to none. We want to set that source to our alpha, which was our z-depth that we rendered and copy pasted into the alpha channel. So now you have this little focal distance. So this is effectively choosing what shade of gray you want it to focus on. But if you have this little guy turned off, so this is off, this is on, now anywhere I click in the scene, it'll focus on that area. So if I click on the front tire, it'll have the front tire in focus, but then the rest, like back here, you can see this is starting to be blurry. And then kind of flipping that, if I click this back spoiler, it's going to be in focus and the rest is going to blur. So to make this easier to see, let's just increase the size just a little bit. So again, we still have our set focal point set to manual. So now again, click on the back spoiler. This comes into focus. This is less focus. Click on the front wheel. And you can see it reverses. So realistically, I would probably maybe press on the roll cage like right here. This is kind of the midpoint of the car, but it's still close to me. So again, I'm still getting nice blur back here. The wheels aren't too blurred. And again, we're getting a little bit of blur back here on the spoiler. And again, we could change the depth map a little bit to get a different variation, but we're going to call this good. So depending on how much depth there is in your scene, this could be a good little post-processing effect that you could add to your renders to make them look a little bit better.